The history we're taught in our school textbooks is a white man's history.
Absolutely.
Which is what the white man wants us to believe. But probably the brown man near the equator, the black man near the equator, the yellow man near the equator has a whole different history that's been wiped out because of imperialism. Okay, so there's this one crazy kind of tangent of history. I think I've spoken to you about this, which I learned from Graham Hancock being on Joe Rogan. So Graham Hancock is one of those historians who talks a lot about undiscovered alternative history. I've had a conversation about him with you.
Yes.
And you told me you don't agree with everything he says, but a lot of the stuff he says is revolutionary.
It is.
So, sir, he spoke about how the Amazon and the history we are taught about the Amazon is not accurate. While the Earth is currently going through a phase of global warming, it also goes through cooling periods. And currently we are in a warming up period. So we are just accelerating global warming because of our bad habits and the way we treat the planet. But this is sort of a natural state for this planet as well. But there are also freezing periods, at the peak of which is the Ice Age. Now the Ice Age doesn't happen overnight, it happens gradually. So snow also melts away, right? And I don't know whether it's during the peak of the Ice Age or during one of the melting periods. What happens is the snow will first melt away and the ice will melt away from near the equator. Because the equator gets heated up the most by the sun.
Yes.
And that's why we are in a tropical zone or whatever. Now, if only the tropical zone is habitable, that means you draw out the equator on the line of the globe and you realize, okay, what are the countries that this covers or what are the continents that this covers? This is tropical Asia, Africa, South America, Central America. Okay, and maybe like a part of Northern America. Which means that only that one strip was habitable. Now, I believe in the Rig Veda or in one of the ancient Indian books, I think it was the Rig Veda, they've described the whole nature of civilization on the planet according to that time. In that book, they've written that, okay, there was civilization in India and the people look like this and this is their behavior. Then there's civilization in Africa and this is their behavior. Egypt. Okay, then there's civilization in South America and Central America, where they've described shamanic civilizations and the Amazonian civilizations and ancient, whatever the predecessors to the Mayans were, etc. Now, we are taught in school history that civilization began from around 2500 years ago with Indus Valley and Mesopotamia and Egypt and Chinese, I think, is taught to us. But that's not entirely true. We're not taught about the Amazonian culture at all. We are not taught that in India itself, it didn't begin with Indus Valley. It began way before that.
Way before that, yeah.
Egypt, those people believe that they were the modern versions of some civilization which began 50,000 years ago. So there has to have been some heavy level of ancient history which is not discovered yet. Now, keeping that in mind, Graham Hancock talks a lot about a focus on the Amazonian culture. Now, the Amazon rainforest is this massive stretch of greenery, which is in the modern day being burnt in order to create soybean farms, I believe.
Yes.
Soybean. And that's when we hear about Amazonian rainforest fires, a lot of those are man-made. A lot of
those are engineered, yes.
Engineered, yeah.
Yes.
Because, again, for the sake of making money.
Yes.
While they're being burnt to create these soybean farms, what's happening is people are discovering these lost cities, which are probably there since years, since millennia. And it's just making us rethink human history. History is also on that brink of rewriting itself all over the world. People are discovering pieces of history that are lost. And people are rethinking how they're looking at history. And Graham Hancock highlights this a lot. So what they've discovered about those Amazonian civilizations, one, there's a lot of lost cities. Two, there were a lot of technologies that those guys developed, which some of those tribes in the Amazon rainforest are still using. Yeah. For example, I think they developed some sort of a soil, which was based on taking a lot of leaves and only burning them up to a certain degree, using that charcoal from those leaves and then mixing it with the actual soil, putting it through some sort of a fermentation chemical process, and that soil was supposed to be some super soil, which was used to grow plants way faster.
Yes.
So then they did more research on the Amazonian rainforest and they realized that, hold on, these trees can't be naturally found in this particular part of the rainforest, which likely means that they were planted by some human beings way back. Now, here's the beauty of nature. If you just leave trees lying around in a particular place, they themselves will start to reproduce.
Yeah.
Like if you cut down a forest, but then you leave it as it is for 20 years, you'll see that the forest regrows itself. 20 years is a very small time period in the timeline of the earth.
Absolutely.
So what they figured is these were cities which were inhabited by people. The theory is that the Europeans brought a lot of disease to these cities. Diseases that were never prevalent. Now keep in mind, Europe was a slightly more modern civilization as compared to this one. This one was there since the descending ice age, when the snow was melting away. Once the snow melted away, human beings went into Europe, stayed there because Europe became habitable by that point. Thousands and thousands of years later, the Europeans decided, okay, let us go see what's out there in the world. And they hit South America, they found all these ancient civilizations which had been there for like 50,000 years. They went, they brought their disease, wiped out all these people. There was this mass, I think, smallpox epidemic, right? Yeah. So the smallpox epidemic throughout the Amazonian rainforest, lots of those people died out. Now, obviously, the winners here are the Europeans who had developed an immunity by that point to smallpox. So they weren't dead. They killed off all these people and they rewrote history. They said, yeah, there was no civilization here for like 50,000 years. Then they took imperialism and spread it to Asia, Africa, America, the rest of the world. And the history we're taught in our school textbooks is a white man's history.
Absolutely.
Which is what the white man wants us to believe. But probably the brown man near the equator, the black man near the equator, the yellow man near the equator has a whole different history that's been wiped out because of imperialism. What they're also discovering about those cultures, these Amazonian cultures, is 1, it was wiped out. 2, the technology. 3, they had a very developed culture in the same way that we have the Vedas developed. They had a developed culture which is sort of retained by the shamans. We had someone called Dr. Mark Plotkin on the podcast who spends time with these tribal people in South America. And he spoke about how they know how to use every plant in the rainforest. They know how to use insects. They know how to use frogs for medicine. And they have cures to things that modern day medicine can't find. Again, modern day medicine is a white man subject. But there have been brown man subjects, yellow man subjects, black man subjects.
So we have been conditioned to think in certain mental patterns.
Yeah.
And these patterns are the imperial colonial patterns of thought. And there are certain taboo areas that you can't go into. For instance, in India nowadays, those taboos are slowly being broken, that maybe the Vedas were not written only 1500 BCE, maybe it's much before that. Even now, it's not part of mainstream history. But when it comes to the Amazon, you're absolutely right. There seems to be a very ancient history out there. The entire Amazon forest seems to be the descendant of gardens planted by humans, specific trees, like you said, with that super soil which has been discovered. And it takes, like you said, just 20 years for an entire forest to grow over a city. So it happened very fast, and maybe this was entirely an inhabited region like we are discovering now.
Yeah.
And because everybody died out because of the plagues and smallpox and everything. So in just 20, 30, 40 years, the entire forest grew over there. And now it is being slowly wiped out and we are discovering what's out there.
Yeah.
So there is this dogma in America, especially North America, about not doing research into certain areas of pre-Columbian history.
Okay.
Because pre-Columbian history is the history of North America or South America before Columbus came to these continents. And the thing is that the entire nation of the United States is actually a stolen nation by the white men. There is an entire history of the natives, of the Native Americans, that extends back thousands of years in North America and South America especially. So in North America, especially more than South America, there has been this taboo against doing any archaeology about with respect to pre-Columbian archaeological sites. Just leave it alone. Don't. And there are certain laws that say that if there is a Native American burial or there's a chance of a Native American burial there, it should not be disturbed. So that ensures that everything stays hidden. And I think Graham Hancock has come up with a new book nowadays, recently, America Undiscovered, something like that. That's the name, I think. And he has gone into these things. So there seems to be a great deal of history. The entire history of the peopling of the Americas is going to be challenged now, because the conventional wisdom, like the Aryan invasion theory, is that the first humans came into the Americas about 12 or 13,000 years ago only. But now we are finding evidence of people being there for more than 100,000 years. And this is flying in the face of the accepted dogma that all these mainstream historians in the Americas have been enforcing.
Yeah.
So we are soon going to see all of these colonial edifices crumble, and a new history is going to emerge soon, including in India, because India is also a very ancient land.
Yeah, and again, as a modern historian like you, I'm sure you get a lot of opposition when you pitch these ideas. I mean, one Clubhouse session threw us so much opposition from Twitter. And I'm just sitting there staring at all these tweets like, yo, this is the issue with, older science and older history, where older rules have to be broken at some point. Which is also why I believe you're a scientist who's delved into like the world of history, because you've realized that older rules were broken and new rules were created. Older beliefs were broken and new beliefs were created.